Alright, hello everyone, welcome back, and let's talk about another little review here of a TV series called Fallout. This is a new series, it just came out in 2024. I managed to breeze through it on Amazon Prime, and I must say, I don't really see much of a reason to keep a subscription after this because there's not that many interesting shows, but well, Fallout was something I think that deserves its own kind of praise. In a way, it stayed true to its own ideas and its own source material. Yes, there was some strange choice of cast of, I don't know, people that just don't look convincing enough to believe that they survived a fallout per se, a nuclear disaster. And of course, it's not very true to the actual video game story. It's very much its own little story here. But I think it's decent in a sense. It doesn't push too much propaganda. There's no real woke ideology that's actually being presented here. Other than the fact that, yes, it is mostly satire in the sense where Fallout itself is a satire about the idea of, the world going into nuclear war and then how the very American rule is keeping people patriotic, and that's what keeps pushing them in the front of trying to repopulate the world. And there's also this sort of a very communist mentality of other groups of people trying to make sure that food is rationed and well kept, and democracy itself is very controlled. And there's also a showcase of that sort of politics, which is much like real life. And I think Fallout touches on all these elements pretty well. I have to say I have no issues with it. It's doing a decent job. And why is this important? Is politics in these kinds of, stories important? Well, for Fallout, thing is politics is part of its element because Fallout is a story about people who have survived a nuclear holocaust. Sorry, a nuclear war and or Holocaust, you can call it either way. And after that, the elite groups have managed to find bunkers to live underground, and the people who are not so fortunate have stayed on the surface, either dying from the immediate explosion, dying from radiation, or staying far enough in some end or corner of the country where they were not part of the center. They managed to slowly start repopulation. There were still, however, a group of them who got affected by radiation and turned into mutants, and those are called ghouls. And they do look like, a ghoul, I guess, which is where they get their name from. Yeah, Walton Goggins did a fantastic job in the show, and I think he absolutely carried it. He acts as the ghoul in the show, and I mean, I really can't imagine anyone else having played a better role than what he did. He's really the centerpiece and most important character in this story because you sort of see how he brings not just this sort of how do you call it, like gravitas, but also it's kind of an overused term at this point, but it's important because we don't really have many characters that can do what these kind of stars, I would say, do. Movie stars, we don't really have that many movie stars. Like the rest of this cast are pretty, you can ignore them, they pretty much look the same. If this image didn't really focus on this guy's face and blur the background, like everyone would pretty much looking the same. Like, okay, fine. Ella Purnell, yes, we know her, so she's decent. Elizabeth and Annabelle O'Hagan. Okay, we have a few recognizable people, but they're not really stars like Walton Goggins here, who I think does a great job of showing charisma, likability, and a compelling character, and believable character. And also, what it means to be a believable character is that once you know what the character's motives are and the kind of person they are and how they speak, their mannerisms, you know that you can believe that a character is going to do something because it's them. You're like, oh, of course he's going to do that because that's what he is. And that's the important thing about great acting. And I think it's proven here again that, him being the ghoul, you sort of can get behind his motivations and his notion and stuff like that. So let me just run through the episodes here. It's going to be a little bit of a different format. I'll just breeze through this as fast as I can and then give you my viewpoints on each of the episodes. So the first one, episode one, the end, just gives you sort of the showcase of how everything started to fall apart and how the Brotherhood is sort of this futuristic organization that is now post in a war, post 200 years after the war. They have sort of reestablished a surface dominance and they're running things by rule of sort of anarchy almost. And everyone has divided themselves into little clans, and which is true, which is how it's actually going to be. And they're running things their own way, using their own forms of technology, their own forms of approaches to life and religion and stuff like that. And yeah, it's all resurfacing in its own way. The story is also dividing us into the life of Ella Purnell in the underground chambers, where she was part of the elite group who managed to survive by staying in a bunker. And yeah, it's just pretty much setting the premise for that. The second one, I would say, is somewhat also introduction or reintroduction and a bit of its filler. They start to showcase to us what it means to be each of these characters. It means to be a person from the bunker, a person from the Brotherhood, and also the Ghoul, and how each of them are showing different parts of how the world has learned to survive. The Brotherhood has adapted through harsh living. They are very picky of their crew. They use military power to showcase dominance, and they try to control what is an existing trade of drugs and illegal trading and gangsterism and all of that. So while that is always running amok, these people are establishing dominant rule by using military power to create some form of control, and are also oppressors in their own right, but I guess that's what it takes to start a government. The ghouls, on the other hand, have turned out to be bounty hunters because most of them seem to have been able to outlive the rest of human civilization by living for almost 200 years since the first nuclear war. And as a result, some of them they lose control and they turn into zombies. And those that don't turn into zombies, if they can get a specific drug that keeps them going, they remain as ghouls and they get to just use their, like their decades of expertise in whatever trade they want to do. So most of them become bounty hunters because I think it's one of the cool little skills that they can do to easily find someone that they can trade in for the resource that they need to keep themselves sane. And that's kind of the story here. Episode 3 is also sort of combined with episode 2. It's just teaching you more about the wasteland and how things go. And I would say it's sort of like fillers that you can have combined into one episode, but whatever. Episode 4 is showing you starts to question the morality of the different walls that there are. So it focuses mainly on the story of Wall 31, 32, and 33, where in 33 is where all the residents of that we know presently are. And they're promoted to 32 if they are performing well, they're doing certain duties, or for the survival of 32, they are pushed into 32. Wall 31 is never really discussed, but it turns out that a lot of the leaders who are running Wall 32 and 33 actually come from Wall 31. And this is something that the people of Wall 33, mainly one particular character, can't recall his name, let me look him up, will be researching and trying to, like uncover the secrets of. He'll find out that most of the leaders, yeah, this guy, Norm, will be trying to find out the secrets of why Wall 31 people are actually all becoming leaders of 33. And while it's near anarchy rule almost because the democracy always votes for them, like there's no way to for a normal Wall 33 citizen to be promoted to become a leader. Always Wall 31 people who come to 33 end up becoming 33's leaders. So there's some sort of thing going on in the background which he's trying to investigate. And then, you know, episode 5, I think, is more of just back and forth between how the cities in the present are also still being nuked. So it's not just 200 years ago. Apparently, nuclear weapons are still being used, and the questions comes up to why, who, and what happens. I think at this point we can sort of predict how the rest of the series goes, even if you don't have context on the story of Fallout. You can sort of understand that in order to continue to sell the idea that these bunkers work, and to keep the surface world always sort of never truly progressing, the underground world is going to keep their resource alive and nuke the surface world continuously. And as long as the surface world doesn't have some sort of leap in technological advancement that the bunkers manage to preserve, there's no way the surface will be able to continue to grow. So, for example, the bunkers, because of the years that they have spent doing research, not only for bunker technology, which is sustenance technology to sustain life, technology to power up their bunkers, technology to improve on farming, underground water piping, filtration systems. So all of these things have advanced over the years underground. But when you nuke these things on the surface, people lose this sense of technology, they lose the experts, they lose the materials they need, they lose the resources, the mining facilities. So you create a scenario where the surface world doesn't have the tech to continue to progress. So this divide has been created by the bunker people to continue to sell the idea that the bunkers are important, but there's more to the story, and you'll see as what it's actually leading to. In episode 6, it shows you how there's a divide in social and sort of geopolitical facts between the factions, and more into the deeper dives of the stories of, I would say, the Brotherhood and what kind of people they are. And I would say the story is very interesting because it divides the personal stories of people like Maximus, Lucy, Cooper, and Norm pretty well. So Norm remains in the bunkers. He starts to investigate things in the bunkers. Lucy is a bunker person on the surface world trying, to be our eyes into why the surface world is so unique and strange. And she is strange herself. Like the whatever principle she has had is sort of like being fed by a silver spoon and living in a bunker her whole life. She doesn't really know the hardships of the surface world. Cooper is our eyes of hardship on the surface world and how he managed to survive all these years as a ghoul, and his tragic history of how he became from a loving father and a movie star to someone who's just a bounty hunter killing people, just to survive. And everyone's characters, I think, are very well fleshed. They really go through a decent um, experience of sorry they give us a decent experience of trying to understand these characters, a very good backstory, a decent flow. I don't really see too much problems in the way they give the story to us or the flow of it to us. The only problem I do have is that these people don't really mature as characters. I would say the only person that really evolves most as a character is Maximus. As for Cooper, I think he's still what he is towards the end because he still killed a kid who might challenge him in the future, even towards the very last few episodes. He still has his own sense of beliefs based on his knowledge of 200 years. So he doesn't really change because he's sort of shaped by hardship, and that makes sense, right? It makes sense that it's difficult to change someone who's a lot older, and I think Cooper reflects that. Maximus is probably the person who has the best character arc, where he's sort of this coward who joins the Brotherhood to try to overcome his fear, and then he ends up in a situation where becomes power hungry because he gets into one of those mech suits. They belong to this guy called Lord Titus, who is actually a coward. He runs from this mutant bear that kills him. It's just pretty funny. And Maximus takes over, and I absolutely love that episode. That was pretty great. I think it's episode two or three or something like that. But it's very early on, and it's really fun. Lucy, on the other hand, is just very, I would say, stagnant for most of the part. It's just her knowledge develops, but she as a character, we don't really feel her mature. Like all of a sudden, yes, sometimes she's able to kill and shoot things and defend herself. Somehow magically, she's able to fight people off when she needs to. We don't really get the experience of how she's able to fend off assailants. Like there's one point, there's this guy from the surface world who she got married to and she had sex with or something like that. And she found out that they're actually invaders from the surface world. She's lucky she didn't get any STDs, but the fact is she managed to fight him off by herself, um, which is really strange because she's like half the size of the dude. Like if you get hit by something that's twice your size, you're more than likely to end up with a concussion or literally die. She even got stabbed by the guy and somehow manages to just to patch herself up and keep going. She didn't even use like a stim or a quick recovery tool or anything to actually help her heal. So certain things not really, working out. Like for Maximus, what he does, he still suffers, he still gets attacked, he still gets trapped in the suit at certain times. So it really shows his vulnerability and his character growth. Cooper as well, he is a ghoul, he's so experienced, but he still can get caught in a bad situation. Yes, he does escape one time like James Bond, but it's believable because of 200 years of experience speaks for itself. You don't really need to say much. Lucy, on the other hand, doesn't have even a tenth of that in terms of combat. She doesn't even have a tenth of Walt like Cooper's experience in combat. Yet she's able to fend for herself in certain situations and figure things out. She was also drugged in one part and being put on an operation bed, but she's able to fend off the drug. Like, why? Is it because she's drug resistant? Is that ever explained in the story or something? Like, I don't really know. Because later on, she is drugged by an experimental bunker. She and Maximus actually end up in a situation where they go into an experimental bunker and they both get drugged, and she's completely susceptible to the drug. So I don't see why at some point she can ignore the effects of the drug and suddenly wake up, and then other points she can't. Because she didn't just get up and kick one item. She managed to get up and wake up from the before the operation happened. She's able to get up and fight off the machine that's trying to operate her for her organs, and she's able to get off the bed and fight a bunch of enemies and literally leave the place. Like, what on earth are you made out of, Lucy? Like, that's absolutely insane. So I would say Lucy has too much plot armor compared to the rest of the characters who feel a lot more grounded in this story. And I don't know whether that's because of she's a woman and agenda. I don't know if that's the real reason, but I feel like it's a bit of it. And I don't really like that because I feel like Ella Purnell has done a good job with her character, making her pretty likable. Like she's decent. You can get behind her notions and her motives and her golden rule and stuff like that. And then all of a sudden she's like a Mary Sue at certain points. I feel like they need to really showcase the difficulty someone of her size and stature can experience in a world like this, because you show all the other characters experiencing it despite their abilities. Like Maximus is military, even if he's a coward, and Cooper is a 200-year-old ghoul, and still he gets into trouble. So yeah, they really need to figure that one out. And okay, anyway, just getting back to the episodes. The radio is just explaining, yeah, as it says, every generation has their own dumbass ideas. So it's actually explaining how each of these factions had their own ideas to how to approach things, and it didn't go out the way they experienced it or expected it to. Eventually, the secrets about Bunker 31 is revealed, and it turns out that 31 is where a lot of the leaders who purchased the bunkers early on, and a lot of these elites who purchased the bunkers early on, actually are residing, and they're actually taking turns to be in charge of Bunker 33 and 32 to win the elections and to spend their time ruling them until their time is up. And then the next person gets, comes out of cryo to continue management. And there's apparently one guy left there who's like a robot at this point. He's no longer human, and he's running management because he's a management fanatic, and he's just managing these resources by defrosting, the elites out of cryo sleep and allowing them to go to Wall 32s and 33s to win the votes and have their little fun, because each of these people have purchased bunkers at some point. And again, 31 to 33 are not the only bunkers in the whole of America, which is where the story is centered on. There's many other bunkers scattered, but they all have their own little weird experiment. And it was part of the bunkers agenda to make as much money as possible by allowing people to create experimental bunkers and do whatever the hell they want. So they could literally create a bunker full of children eating shit to see how that bunker fends off. So it's almost like everything became some kind of weird Nazi experiment. If you guys are familiar with how the Nazis used to experiment with human beings and chemical weapons and all these kinds of things, it's kind of creepy. Like even the Japanese used to do that, right? During war, Japanese used to cut people's hands off just to see how they react, and it's just for fun. These people like to do these weird, strange torture things, and it's really pushing the bounds of what is really heavy content to some people, but without being too graphic about it. So Fallout really brings things into question without getting into becoming some sort of a horror porn or anything like that. And I really appreciate that. I think that's decent to just put into people the ideas that this is the kind of humanity that you have to deal with, and there is still good somewhere in between them that's trying to survive. And so, generally, I like the Fallout series. I think it was really, really good. I do feel that some characters need to, have their plot armor removed. I really felt that these four are so well protected that nothing's going to happen to them, to the point where it feels so safe when they're on the screen in a world that is not safe. And I think that has to be a way to figure that one out. It's just one of those things, right? When you create a extremely hostile world and these people survive just because, and not specifically because of how skillful they are or the scenarios that they create themselves. Like, you see, for example, Cooper being a 200-year-old ghoul, he has to have some setup to the way he approaches situations and don't really see that setup. But we sort of understand that, okay, because he's so experienced, maybe he can figure it out. But when you're not a superhuman, never establish the person as a superhuman like Lucy or Maximus, you have to show some kind of setup or some kind of premise to make us understand why they can do the things and survive in the same world that Cooper has survived in. And yeah, that's kind of where I draw the line in terms of realism. I like the story of the Moldaver and how, some people have figured out eternal life, which is why they're able to stay in human form while having the lifespan of the ghouls, and that's part of the research that has gone into the story. And so you do have some people who are also not really immortal, but have really ridiculous extended life, and that's part of something that they were working on before the bunkers itself, and it worked out apparently. So more of it will be coming in season two, and I really am looking forward to it. I can't wait to see it. Generally, for me, Fallout, I think I would rate it as a 7 out of 10. It is not the strongest series, but I really do love it. It's not something I might rewatch um, for the fun of it. It's not that amazing or cool or fun. Actually, you know what? Let me drop another point because it doesn't really have the rewatch potential. It's not like I'm going to be like, let's go back and watch that episode again. It was so cool. Like, damn, do you remember like watching? It doesn't feel that way. It's not like Stranger Things, so you can binge another season all over again just to see how cool it is or how exciting and graphical. This one doesn't really have that kind of intensity or fun or comedy. Like only one or two episodes actually showcase that. Like the one where the Titus guy is running the mech armor, the wild bear attacks him, the mutant bear attacks him. Those funny moments are very rare, and those exciting moments are also very rare. It's more than often quite gloom and doom, and very much makes sense for the kind of premise it is, but it's not really something very new or very intelligent. It may be good for younger audiences who are finally able to watch mature shows, who have never had these kinds of concepts delivered to them in the past. But because of, I'm in my 30s, right? I've seen these kinds of ideas and concepts way back since when I was a kid. So this is nothing new to me. It's a pre-existing concept. There's absolutely nothing new. I've also played some of the Fallout games, so I kind of get the idea already. I think it's decent that they're trying to make this into a TV series, and I think they can make it more exciting. Like the action sequences pretty bland, not that many, nothing really unique. Every character doesn't really stand on their own ground when fighting Cooper, for example. It's a very nice scene where the ghoul is like fighting off a bunch of guys and shooting them all, and everyone is dying, but everyone just feels like fodder. There's no real meaning to the people that he fights. Like, is there a specific gang that he has to take on? What's special about that gang? Do they use a specific technology that's unique compared to another gang? Why is one person different from the other? And that individuality, I feel, doesn't really exist in this show for a lot of these side characters. Like for example, Chet, I didn't even care about him, Stephanie, and Chet and their story with they're having a kid in the bunker. Like, I don't even care for them. I have a kid too. Like, I know the whole experience. Trust me, I'm speaking as a father. I don't care for these parents at all. Like, there's no weight that they bring to the story. They're not helping Norm investigate anything. They don't care for their child's future that much. They're pretty chill about it, and it's just very bland, and yeah, there's no real importance to introducing certain characters and trying to add in a little bit of a side story just to make things feel creepy that doesn't really go anywhere. Even Thaddeus, as a side character for Maximus, an important character by the way, because he actually forms a relationship with Maximus, who becomes Titus, is suddenly just drops the entire idea that Maximus did save his life, and all of a sudden just doesn't align with Maximus. Like if they actually align together to go and lie to the Brotherhood that Maximus now has taken over Titus' suit and Titus is dead, but they come up with a cover story saying that there was no choice. Titus died and Maximus had no choice but to take over the suit, and Thaddeus actually aligns with him and they figure that out. That would have been really cool, but Thaddeus just leaves Maximus in the suit locked up and steals his reactor core and then leaves him, abandons him despite the loyalty that they have formed. It just feels like a story cut short, and all that character building for Thaddeus to become a friend of Maximus per se became nothing in the end. Like, see, Thaddeus lasted for 4 episodes that was used for absolutely no reason. If anything, it added to Maximus's character, but it really broke the relationship off. It just cut it off completely, and then started to put Maximus into a relationship with Lucy instead. So, it's one of those like you set it up for nothing almost, and it's kind of sad because it later on the person that actually helps Maximus, it should have been Thaddeus because Thaddeus was the one that is with him, but it turns out it was actually another friend of his who was in the camp with the Brotherhood, a person who I do not believe can join any military. Let me show you who that person is. Do they have it? It's like some kind of a trans. It's like a girl, I think. I think it's a girl who's like a trans man or something. I'm pretty sure it's a girl. It looks like a girl, but like I'm sure they're taking hormonal pills or whatever to, behave like a man or something. Overseer Benjamin. No. Yeah, I can't really find the person here. I can't remember who they are, but that person turns out was like introduced in like one episode or something. They were like there with Maximus early on in the camp, and then they completely get cut off. And then all of a sudden they are supporting Maximus when it matters, and Thaddeus is not there. It's like they're trying to create another random relationship, trying to make us feel bad for that person. Like that person's the actual new hero now that we have to get behind when that person was not there for the 4 episodes that Thaddeus was. So yeah, it just feels very disconnected in that sense as well. But I am looking forward. I really hope the next season will bring this to a 7, and maybe season 3 will bring this to an 8. I like the idea and the concept, as I'm saying, and I think it's worth the watch. Anything above 5 is a worth watch for me. It's not worth a rewatch for sure, and it's better if you're new to this and you don't have any pre-context to it. But I do, and so I can only give you a review based on my experience. And let me know what you guys think, and if you guys enjoyed it. I personally think that this is good, and more stories like Fallout needs to be told to people who have not really got into it, who don't really play video games maybe, and who maybe need some kind of a change of pace or an idea or concept to actually teach them how people would end up behaving if they were split into real little clans and end up living in walls and divided by the elites and the non-elites and how they would each find their ways to survive, how military power would take control, how the gangs would form their own trade routes, and you know, different kinds of problems basically. And I like that approach. It really, really showcases a very beautiful combination of elements to tell a story. But yeah, that's about it from me for Fallout. I'll see you guys in the next one. Take care.